328,000 households faced homelessness last year in England. And that is not just a statistic, that is a breakdown and a collapse in our system. I'm sure you've all seen the headlines about homelessness and how it's on the rise, but the numbers from last year have come in and we are now hitting record-breaking territory, and it doesn't look. I know we usually talk about just black issues, but today we have to really look at what's going on in the UK and specifically England, because why are the numbers surging right now? And ultimately, how is this having an effect on families and specifically children? And what are the policies in place that are hurting us as people? Because something is terribly wrong. And I'm going to share a bit of a vulnerable and personal story about how I almost faced some form of homelessness when I was a child. And here's the thing no one wants to talk about. We might just be entering a time where homelessness is actually normal and not really a crisis. It just becomes something that's a part of our society, which is crazy. So I'm going to look at my screen real quick because there's some statistics I want to read out to you. In 2024, England hit a homelessness record. Again, 327,950 households sought council support. 127,890 households were placed in temporary accommodation. 165,510 children are growing up in these conditions, and that's a 13.6% rise in 1 year. Ultimately, how does that reflect on our society, and what does that show you? Clearly, we've got some serious issues. Families are finding it harder and harder, and one of the biggest things, and I know I don't even like talking about this, but there is a clear cost of living crisis. And when I say that, essentially what's happening is our typical things are getting more and more expensive. There was a video I watched the other day about how even little things like a chocolate bar, they're essentially making the chocolate smaller, but they're actually charging us more. These things, like my £50 weekly shop that I would spend in an Aldi or a Lidl, isn't going as further as it used to, especially not 5 years ago and especially not 10 years ago. This continued rise in cost and inflation is also affecting everyone, because what's happening is, well, jobs are not rising at the same rate. If they were, then everything would kind of be okay. But the government ain't really doing much to solve it. And me and you, all we can do is just try and make as much money as humanly possible. And we end up stuck in this rat race. But sometimes these people that are facing homelessness, it's not for the lack of trying. Now, if you live in London, and I grew up in London, I've only moved out of London a year ago, so I see this all the time. You see homeless people on the train, on the streets, and you speak to them and you'll know they always have these crazy stories, these life stories, but those are not the only type of people that end up homeless. It's not just drug abusers, like legit families that are working typical jobs, they can also end up homeless because they can't afford the rent, they default on their mortgage, they get evicted, so on and so forth. And these situations are happening. And in a country that is supposed to be one of the, most advanced countries in the world, these statistics are absolutely abhorrent, shocking, pretty bad. So we have to think to ourselves, what's going on? On top of that, we're seeing food banks being used now more than ever. Like, the line for food banks are the highest they've ever been. That is a sign and a symptom of the society that, we have built. My next real question is, when we think about this, who is affected the most? Now, there's two main people in our society that are the most vulnerable: the elderly and children. Now, essentially, when it comes to these type of people, we know that they are the most vulnerable. We've actually seen that there's a growing number of young people that are getting turned away from homeless shelters, centers for help, because firstly, they're already overloaded and they can only handle so many people. And the people that are working in these centers and homeless shelters, they're only getting paid so much. And essentially, they don't have the funding. And wherever there's poverty, we see crime. And then we notice that we blame a lot of these homeless people and stuff for crime, but it's kind of like a vicious cycle. So there's that. On top of that, entire families who were stable, they're now getting evicted. Their tenancies are being terminated. And it's a two-factor thing here, because landlords and homeowners are essentially getting priced out themselves because, their mortgage rates have gone up. And again, inflation is affecting them, which means that, unfortunately, the buck always gets passed down to somebody. So, I pay a mortgage, and, if my rates go up, if I've got a tenant, I have no choice. Or else I'm going to lose my property. So it's not all, a lot of people hate landlords, but it's not always the landlord's fault. Landlords are just normal people sometimes. Obviously, you get the people that have 10, 15 properties, and those are the people that Gary Economics hates. But, a landlord that has maybe one or two houses and he rents one out as something to help him make more money, he's just a normal person who is lucky enough to have two houses. You know what I mean? So with that being said, these issues are being passed down to, these households that are then getting evicted and they become homeless. On top of that, if you are in one of these scenarios, the likelihood is you end up in a poor housing condition. That's just pretty typical, especially if you are relying on government housing or getting support or even staying in shelters. Then they're not the best places. They're not the most sanitary places. They're not the most hygienic places. They can sometimes be a place where, you are putting your health at risk. And children and the elderly, again, they are the most vulnerable. They get sick, they struggle in these environments. But we're not just talking about rough sleepers on the streets of London or Manchester or Birmingham. We're talking about people that have families, and actually they might get put up somewhere in a hostel or whatever, but the conditions are pretty rough. So has anyone ever heard the saying, you can't fix a leak by mopping the floor? If you haven't, I just made it up, because you have to turn off the tap. And the reason I say this is essentially we need to look at, why is this actually happening? One of the major reasons that was cited in the article that I read when I was coming up with the idea of this video is basically the rise in no-fault evictions. And this is something that can affect loads of people, and especially during that COVID period, we saw the rise in this. The other factor, which I kind of alluded to previously, was basically rent prices are surging a lot higher than wage growth. So if wages are going like this, rent prices are going like this. And essentially it's putting people in a very compromising and difficult position. And again, I personally don't blame the landlords, especially like the landlords that they just got 1 or 2 properties. We're not talking about the big monopoly players right now. They have to pay a mortgage, they have to get these things paid for, and if a family can't afford it, it's not always their fault. I'm not saying you should put people out on the streets, but it's essentially not the landlord's fault. Like there is nothing they can do as an individual when rates are getting higher and inflation is the way that it is, and the money isn't spreading like it used to. And there's 2 other factors. We got the social housing issue and the shortage of buildings and the delays in buildings. They always say they're going to build homes, they're going to build this, but they never do. And also, local housing allowances aren't really covering costs for people. One is a support system, right? The allowances that people can get. But essentially, because of the cost of things, it's not really doing much. It's not really helping. And then when it comes to the delays and all the social housing factors, well, there isn't not enough homes. We need more homes as a country, especially in areas like London where people want to stay in a certain area. They can't even afford to stay in those areas, so they have to look further away, which it's a lifestyle choice, because, you know, I moved out of London. I could have stayed in London and I could afford it, but I didn't want to. And I wanted to get more for my money. You know, I was able to get a much bigger property by leaving London. But when it comes to homelessness, it's a multi-layered issue. It's obviously wage stagnation, as well as that rise in rent and mortgages. On top of that, you know, we look at the government support systems, and I'm not someone who thinks that people should rely on the state. I'm totally against it, actually. But if the system's there, the system should work. And right now, the system doesn't work because of other policies, because of the inflation, and essentially the country not really being able to help people, because the country just doesn't do what it's supposed to do. Now, some local councils are actually going bankrupt trying to house the homeless. And in some ways, rightly so, they should be. But also, they've got to start thinking about, what can we do as a society to help these homeless people, or people that are at risk of being homeless, to actually be able to enjoy the money they make? Because some of these people are working. Their wages are not good. Maybe they're in low-skilled jobs, so on and so forth. But the job market is absolutely effed right now, which is also affecting people. Wages are low. So again, it sounds like I'm repeating myself, but all of these things become like a self-fulfilling cycle or a vicious cycle, and it just kind of continues and continues and continues and continues. And we end up with more people that are homeless, who can't afford to even look after themselves. And if they have a family, well, the family's effed too. And in the same article I read, local councils have already overspent by 330 million for last year. So you can only imagine what it's going to be like this year. On top of that, shelters have actually warned councils that they'd probably have to spend around 4 billion a year up until around 2029 if they want to fix this crisis. Now, for me, that's a lot of cash. That's a lot of cash. And that is proof to me that this system is absolutely broken. The system is absolutely, like, it's broken. And sometimes when we just throw money at issues, we don't get down to the root core of what the issue is, the systematic issues that are causing this, which for some reason our country is always focused on band-aid solutions rather than actually healing from within. Where is the holistic approach that we are looking at here? It doesn't seem to be one. I haven't found one, and I'm doing my reading and research and I can't see one. And if you know one, comment below. I'd love to know what people are doing, or what the government actually doing to try and fix this. Now, again, in that same article that I read, families are getting put in Airbnbs, travel lodges, but it's temporary accommodation. If you got a family, how damaging is it for your child to be going from home to home, to be in a hotel, or to be in a travel lodge, to be in an Airbnb, and you know that this is not a stable environment for the children? This is where the poverty cycle kind of continues, because these kids don't get the proper upbringing, which means that they can't fulfill their potential. And then they end up in a cycle of homelessness and drug abuse and all these issues, and then, you know, end up not being able to commit to a fruitful society. And this is exactly how these scenarios continue to repeat themselves year after year without getting any better, because we never fix the internal solutions. We never fix things holistically. The question we have to ask ourselves is, what is the government actually doing? Now, the Labour government have promised to pledge 1 billion per year to homelessness services, and they've said that they're going to try and build 1.5 million homes. Alongside that, Section 21 evictions are being abolished. But, and this is a big but, do we genuinely believe in Labour? I don't know. I don't know. I'm not too political, so I don't, conservative, Labour, they're all the same devils to me. However, what I would say is that a lot of these governments, a lot of the time, they're all talk, they're all bark, they're no bite. We never get anything of substance. In fact, things just seem to get harder. Seem to get more expensive. Things just don't seem to improve. So for me, I'm looking at it like, should I really, should I get my hopes up that they're going to help people? Are they going to build those 1.5 million homes? I remember Sadiq Khan talking about all the homes he's going to build for years. And I don't know, where are those homes? Because I ain't seen them yet. If you've seen these homes, and more importantly, what the impact of these homes that Sadiq Khan has built, I would love to know, because homelessness wouldn't be at the height that it is if, they did what they said they were going to do. So, pledging 1 billion a year sounds nice. Building 1.5 million homes in a year sounds nice. But the problem is we just never get it. We never get what they say. And to be honest, it's annoying. It is annoying. It's annoying. It's annoying to sit there knowing that these people say what they're going to do this one thing and they never do it. And I'm not sitting there saying I've got the answers, because I do not have the answers. If I did, I probably wouldn't work there, but I would probably find my way to help in politics. But I don't need to have the answers to be able to identify that something is clearly wrong. Now, there are three main things that people that work within homelessness services identified as keys to try and help fix the issue, right? Not just band-aid solutions, but things that can really get people off of the streets. Because in a country like England that's supposed to be so great, it's crazy. We've got people at food banks and, rough sleepers. It's crazy to me. I go to places that are supposed to be developing countries and you don't see it as bad as it is here, which is absolutely nonsense. So the first thing is crisis and shelter. They say that there should be 90,000 new social rent homes annually, but they really want more. But they're saying realistically, that's what they want to see. We need to restore housing benefits to reflect actual rental markets. That's one of the big things right now, is that a lot of the benefits, and I'm not someone that believes in like having like a strong welfare state and stuff like that. But, for people that can't afford it, if I could benefit from it, I'd take it too. I ain't gonna lie to you. But my point here is that a lot of the benefits and a lot of the allowances that are available, they're not actually in line with the cost of living and the cost of rent and the rise, the rent rise, the price, or the way that rent has gone up so much. Like, it's not in line with that. So people are having issues with that. And the third point is that housing services across the country need better funding. So that's building homes, better structure, making it more affordable for people to actually get homes, more safety for homeowners and renters. All of these factors obviously will play a part, but there's also some societal factors that I want to add to the three that they mentioned. Homelessness derives from more than just that. It derives from ultimately people not being able to look after themselves financially. And if we built a society where, regular jobs actually got paid what they're worth, people felt like, these jobs are able to sustain me and a family, and things were more affordable, then the economics would make sense. So we need to build a society and we need to build a country where, people that work good, honest jobs get paid what they're worth. Nurses, doctors, midwives, firefighters, policemen, everyone, like, all, not just public services, but private services too. Like, if people's wages and income were at the level that it should be, then I think that we'd be in a much better place as a society. And if it was in line with inflation, and if the cost of living wasn't going so crazy as it is now, where it's probably the worst it's ever been and it's absolutely bonkers, then, I think we would be able to handle these issues a lot better. But I think that there's a bit of a societal issue. There's a societal issue. A lot of people are sick, a lot of drug abuse, a lot of crime, and crime follows where poverty is. Drugs, drug abuse, delinquent behavior, that follows where poverty lies. And, when these people have children, they end up in the same cycle, and it just becomes a cycle that is damn near impossible to break. So, right now, it's not like we're just seeing more homelessness. It's worse than that, because I think now we're getting used to it. We're seeing these long lines at food banks, and it's just becoming a normal part of society when it shouldn't be. And there's more that needs to be done. I don't have all the answers, but I know I can talk about it. And before I wrap this up, I too was once homeless. There was a time, I can't remember how old I was, but I'll never forget it. And my mum couldn't afford the mortgage, and she went to court, so on and so forth. And I remember the day, basically, she was in court and the bailiffs came round. And if you've ever had a bailiff come round, when, that's my only experience having it, but if you ever had a bailiff come round, they basically knock the door, right? They knocked the door. My brother said, no, I'm not letting you in. I had a bit of back and forth. Then they started drilling the lock on the door. So they drilled a hole on the door, opened the door, and said, everyone's got to get out. So I think it was just me, my brother-in-law, my brother, and my sister at home at the time. So we had to pack our bags. But we didn't. But my mum was actually in court while they were doing that, and then she came back and then was back in the house that evening. So, and I remember, like, you think, getting evicted is sad, or you're gonna cry or whatever. Like, I can't remember. I just was a bit like, what the fuck is going on? I knew what was happening, but I didn't know the details. Obviously, I was only a child. So, yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. So if you like this video, you should definitely watch this video that I made right here about the housing crisis for Black people. Take a watch. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Peace.